Jesus only gave one exception that allows divorce, just one. But Paul, writing years later, adds a second one that Jesus never mentioned at all. So which one is correct? Did Paul contradict Jesus? Or is there something in the original Greek that ties both of them together in a way most sermons skip right past? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what both men said, in their own words, and where 2,000 years of churches actually started disagreeing. No agenda. No denomination. Just the text. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, hit subscribe now. This channel does one every week. Here's the scene. A group of religious leaders corner Jesus with a loaded question. Is it lawful to divorce a wife for any cause at all? This wasn't a random question. People at the time were already arguing about it. Some said almost any reason was enough to divorce, others said it should be much harder than that. So they are really asking Jesus to pick a side in an argument everyone already knew about. Jesus doesn't just pick a side. He goes further back than the argument itself. He points to Genesis, the two become one flesh, and what God has joined, no one should separate. Then he gives his one exception. Except for porneia, a Greek word usually translated sexual immorality, divorcing and remarrying makes someone an adulterer. That single Greek word is the hinge this entire debate swings on. Some traditions read it narrowly. It means adultery specifically and nothing else. Other traditions point out that porneia has a wider range in Greek, covering various forms of sexual sin beyond just one specific act, which would mean the exception is broader than the strictest reading. Jesus names one door. The argument that's followed for 2,000 years is about exactly how wide that door actually opens. Now here's the part most teaching either skips or rushes through, because Jesus isn't the only voice on this in the New Testament. Paul, writing to a young church in Corinth, deals with a situation Jesus never directly addressed: a believer married to someone who refuses to stay married to them because of their faith. This wasn't rare for Paul's audience. People were converting to a brand new, controversial faith, and some of their spouses simply wanted out because of it. Paul's instruction: if the unbelieving spouse insists on leaving, let them leave. And then he says something specific. The believer is not bound in that case. The Greek word there, doulo, literally means enslaved. Paul is saying, you are not chained to a marriage your spouse has already walked away from. So now there are two named exceptions in the New Testament, not one. Jesus's built on porneia. Paul's built on abandonment by an unbelieving spouse. Did Paul contradict Jesus, or extend a principle Jesus already implied? That's the real question, and it's exactly where Christian traditions split. If you want the actual text behind debates like this instead of just being handed a conclusion, that's what this channel does every week. Subscribe if you haven't, and turn on notifications, because next week we're covering a topic just as contested: what the Bible actually says about wealth and poverty. So why, with both passages sitting right there in plain Greek, do churches still land in different places? It comes down to three genuine questions. Not people avoiding the text, but people wrestling honestly with what it doesn't fully spell out. First, how wide is porneia really? Adultery only, or sexual sin more broadly? Second, is Paul's abandonment principle locked to his exact scenario, an unbelieving spouse leaving, or does it represent a wider idea that some forms of abandonment break a marriage even when Scripture doesn't name every version of it? Things like abuse, or a believing spouse who completely deserts the marriage. This is one of the most practically important questions in this whole debate, because real churches have to help real people through exactly these situations. Third, and this one carries the biggest weight, even in cases where divorce itself was allowed, does that automatically mean remarriage is too? Some traditions have historically treated those as two separate questions. Divorce might be tolerated, while remarriage is still restricted. Others read the text as treating them as one package, since neither Jesus nor Paul ever commands permanent separation, without the option to remarry as its own separate rule. These aren't loopholes people invented to dodge the text. They're the actual places where the New Testament leaves room for faithful people to read carefully and still land differently. I want to say this plainly, this isn't an abstract debate for everyone watching. If you've been through divorce, or you're trying to figure out what's actually permitted in your situation, this isn't a thought experiment. It's your life, and a YouTube video can't carry the weight that a real conversation with someone who knows your situation can. So here's what I'd actually suggest. Know what the text says, both passages, not just the one you happen to be taught, and bring your specific situation to people you trust. A pastor, a counselor, your own careful study of Scripture. Don't let one verse, repeated without its context, settle something this textured. And if a pastor has only ever quoted you half of this, Jesus' words but never Paul's, or the other way around, you now know enough to ask a better question. So here's where it actually lands. Jesus answers a real argument people were already having, and still leaves one door open, built on porneia. Paul, writing to a different church facing a different problem, names a second door, built on abandonment. And for 2,000 years, careful readers have disagreed about exactly how wide those doors open, not from carelessness, but from taking the text seriously enough to wrestle with what it leaves unresolved. No agenda here. Just what's actually written. If this gave you something clearer than what you walked in with, subscribe and tell me in the comments which reading you grew up with. I read everyone.